71 years old, and the sharpest I've ever been, which, apparently, was the problem. My name is Justin Scott, retired school principal, 26 years running Jefferson Middle School on North High Street in Columbus, Ohio, which means I spent a quarter-century managing children who thought they were smarter than me, parents who were certain they were smarter than me, and a school board that changed its mind every 18 months about what smart even meant. You do that long enough, you develop a specific skill set. You learn to read a room before anyone in the room knows they're being read. You learn to recognize the particular body language of someone who has already made a decision and is now constructing the appearance of consultation. You learn that the most dangerous thing in any institution, school, family, or otherwise, is a person who has convinced themselves that what they want and what's right are the same thing. My daughter Brenda had convinced herself of exactly that. It just took me longer than it should have to see it. The house is a 4-bedroom colonial at 47 Brentwood Avenue, Clintonville, the North Columbus neighborhood of oak-lined streets, front porches, and the specific civic pride of people who chose a neighborhood rather than just a zip code. My late wife Patricia and I bought it in 1993 for $187,000. We paid it off in 2009. By October of this year, comparable sales in the neighborhood were coming in at $415,000, which I knew because I paid attention to such things the way a man pays attention when the thing in question is the place he has spent 32 years of his life building into something worth protecting. Brenda knew the number too. She'd mentioned it at Easter dinner in April. The way you mention something you've been thinking about long enough that you can't quite keep it contained anymore. Dad, you know the Hendersons down the block sold for $410. This house is worth more than that. She'd said it to the table generally, which meant she was testing the room. I'd nodded and passed the rolls and filed it under give it time. I gave it too much time. Wednesday, October 8th, 8:30 a.m. Brenda called and said my regular physician, Dr. Alan Cooper, a careful, thorough internist I'd seen for 9 years on Olentangy River Road, had an opening for a follow-up appointment regarding my August blood work. She offered to drive me. She'd been offering to drive me places with increasing frequency since August, which I had noted without yet understanding the direction it was heading. I accepted the ride. I had no reason not to. She was my daughter. She did not drive me to Dr. Cooper's office on Olentangy River Road. She drove me to Riverside Senior Living on Henderson Road, a pleasant, well-maintained facility with tasteful landscaping and a lobby that smelled like lavender and institutional carpet cleaner. And she handed the intake coordinator a folder of documents before she handed me anything. The folder included a health care power of attorney she'd had me sign in March of 2023, 18 months earlier, when I'd had a minor cardiac event that turned out to be a severe panic attack following Patricia's passing, and which Brenda had framed at the time as, just a precaution, Dad, just so someone can make decisions if you're ever incapacitated. I had signed it at my most vulnerable. 18 months later, she was using it on a Wednesday morning to check me into a senior living facility, while I was standing in the lobby holding a travel mug of coffee and trying to understand what I was looking at. The intake coordinator, a professional, practiced woman named Gail who clearly did this many times a week and had developed the specific, careful warmth of someone managing difficult moments for difficult families, looked at me with that practiced warmth and said, Mr. Scott, we're so glad you're here. We've prepared a room in the West Wing. If you'll follow me. Give me a moment, I said. Of course. Take all the time you need. I looked at Brenda. She was not looking at me. She was looking at Gail, performing a version of composed concern that she had probably rehearsed, and doing it reasonably well. My daughter is not a stupid woman. She is organized and patient and capable of sustained effort toward a goal, which are qualities I'd been proud of for most of her 43 years, and was now reconsidering in light of current evidence. Brenda, I said. Just her name. Quietly. No heat. She finally looked at me. Dad, this is... Don't, I said. Not right now. She closed her mouth. I turned to Gail. Is there somewhere I can make a private phone call? There's a sitting room just down the hall. Thank you. I walked to the sitting room. I sat in a wingback chair that faced a window overlooking the landscaped garden. I took 3 even breaths, the way I'd taught myself to do in faculty meetings when a board member said something that made me want to say something I'd regret. And I called my attorney. I didn't know yet that what I was about to tell him would produce a response I had not anticipated from a document I had signed 3 months earlier. A document that was about to make Brenda's entire plan structurally impossible. I didn't know yet that the house she'd put me here to vacate wasn't mine to take. I knew one thing. I had not spent 26 years running a middle school to be outmaneuvered by a plan that required me to not pick up my phone. The attorney's name is Carl Webb, 59 years old, estate and elder law, North Columbus, office on Indianola Avenue, 2 miles from my house. He had done my estate work for 11 years, wills, updates, the trust document we'd executed quietly on July 14th of this year, 14 weeks before this Wednesday morning. Carl had the specific methodical energy of a man who never moves quickly because he doesn't need to. Every document he files is so precisely constructed that speed is irrelevant. He picks up on the second ring. Carl, it's Justin Scott. My daughter just drove me to Riverside Senior Living on Henderson Road and checked me into the facility using the healthcare POA from 2023. A pause, short and precise. Are you mentally competent? Completely. Did you consent to this placement? I did not. Do you know if she's filed or is planning to file a guardianship petition? I don't know yet. She had a folder of documents with her. Okay, listen carefully. Sign nothing. Agree to nothing. Be cooperative with the facility staff. They're doing their jobs, but do not authorize any evaluations or assessments until I tell you to. I'm going to make 2 calls. Who? First call is to my colleague Dr. Susan Hartley. She did your competency evaluations in August. I'm going to get her on record today as your treating physician for this purpose. Second call is to the trust. Carl. Justin. The trust document we filed in July. She's going to go for the house. She's probably already planning to petition for guardianship over your assets. She cannot do that for an asset you don't own. A pause that had a very specific quality to it. She doesn't know about the trust. Nobody does. Nobody. Carl confirmed. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. Don't leave the sitting room. I sat in the wingback chair and looked at the garden through the window. The landscaping at Riverside Senior Living was genuinely pleasant. Whoever designed it understood that older people deserved beautiful things to look at, which was a philosophy I respected even under the circumstances. I thought about Patricia, about the conversation we'd had 3 weeks before she passed, when she'd told me she was worried about what would happen to the house. Not about the money. Patricia had never cared much about the money. She was worried about the house, about what it meant, about the 32 years of life we'd built in it, and whether it would end up managed correctly. I'd told her I'd handle it. She believed me because she always believed me, and I had spent the 11 months since she died making sure I was worthy of that. The trust was part of making sure. Brenda was about to discover what the other part looked like. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Carl called back at 9:17 a.m., 47 minutes after I'd sat down in the wingback chair. Long enough that I'd finished my travel mug of coffee and accepted a cup of the facility's tea from a staff member named Tom, who seemed genuinely pleasant and completely unaware of the legal architecture that was currently being assembled 2 miles away on Indianola Avenue. Here's where we are. I've spoken to Dr. Hartley. She's filing an affidavit of competency today based on your August evaluation and her professional assessment from a telephone consultation this morning. That affidavit is time-stamped before any guardianship petition Brenda files. It is going to be the first document a judge sees in any proceeding. Good. The trust is clean. Filed July 14th, recorded at the Franklin County Recorder's Office. July 16th. The Scott Family Revocable Trust is the title holder of 47 Brentwood Avenue. You are the grantor and current trustee. Your son Eddie is the successor trustee and sole beneficiary. Eddie, my younger son, 38 years old, civil engineer, lives in the short north with his wife Beth and their 7-year-old daughter Lily. Eddie had known about the trust since August. He knew because I'd told him it existed and what it contained and what his responsibilities as successor trustee would be if something happened to me. I hadn't told him why I'd created it in July rather than later, because in July I hadn't fully understood why myself. I just knew the way you know things after 32 years of reading rooms, that something was building, and I needed to build something more stable first. Brenda's going to file a petition for guardianship over my person and my assets, I said. Almost certainly. Her attorney, She has an attorney named Phil Bowman in September. Probate specialist, downtown Columbus. He filed preliminary paperwork for an emergency guardianship petition this morning. I confirmed this through the court docket 20 minutes ago. The petition is based on the claim that you have shown signs of cognitive decline and are unable to manage your own affairs. I looked at the garden. A cardinal was sitting on the edge of the stone bird bath near the east wall, just sitting there, doing exactly what it was supposed to do, unbothered by proceedings. September, I said. She retained an attorney in September. Yes, September. 1 month before the Wednesday morning cardiology appointment that was not a cardiology appointment. 1 month of preparation, of documents of a folder assembled in advance, of a plan that had been running concurrently with every phone call and Sunday dinner, and offered to drive me to appointments that I had accepted without question. Carl, what does the guardianship petition cover? Just my person or my assets too? Both. She's petitioning for guardianship over your person and conservatorship over your estate. Can she get it? No. Carl's voice carried the specific confidence of a man who had already run the calculation and arrived at a conclusion. She cannot establish conservatorship over an asset you don't own. The trust owns 47 Brentwood. You don't. A conservator can only manage the ward's personal property. You have limited personal property outside the trust. As for guardianship over your person, Dr. Hartley's affidavit will make that petition collapse at the initial hearing. How long? I want you out of there today if possible. The facility cannot hold a competent adult against their will. You have the right to discharge yourself. But I want the affidavit filed first, so the record is clean. Give me until 2 p.m. I'm fine, Carl. The tea is acceptable. He almost laughed. Almost. I'll call you at 2. I sat in the wingback chair until Carl called. I read the facility newsletter. I had a second cup of tea. Tom brought me a shortbread cookie, which I accepted because there was no reason to be rude about the cookie. Gail checked on me twice, maintaining her professional warmth while clearly noting that I had made no move toward completing any intake paperwork. At 1:48 p.m., Carl called to confirm the affidavit was filed. At 2:03 p.m., I walked out of Riverside Senior Living under my own power, in the same clothes I'd arrived in, carrying my travel mug and my phone. Brenda had gone. She'd left at 11:30, per Tom, who mentioned it the way a staff member mentions something when they're not sure if it's helpful information but sense that it might be. She left a number to reach her, Tom said, in case you needed anything. Thank you, Tom, I said. I won't be needing it. I called Eddie from the parking lot. Dad, what happened? I need you to check the Franklin County Recorder's website and confirm the trust document is still on record. A pause. Keyboard sounds. Yeah, it's right here. Scott Family Revocable Trust filed July 14th. Why? Dad, where are you? Riverside Senior Living parking lot. I'll explain everything when I get there. Is Beth home? She's picking up Lily from school. Good. Make coffee. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I didn't know yet what Brenda was going to do when she found out the guardianship petition had landed on a property the trust owned, and not on any asset she could reach. I didn't know yet what her attorney Phil Bowman was going to say when Carl Webb filed his response. And I absolutely did not know yet that Dale, Brenda's husband, who had driven her to 2 meetings with Phil Bowman, and who had been, I was now understanding, a more active participant in this than I'd given him credit for, was going to do something in the next 72 hours that would change the shape of the hearing entirely. I drove to Eddie's house in the short north with the windows down, October in Columbus. The leaves were turning on 4th Street, going amber and gold the way Ohio leaves do when they mean it. It was a beautiful day to have a daughter who had just made the most expensive mistake of her life. An emergency guardianship petition has a specific sound when it hits a wall. Not a crash, nothing that dramatic. More like the sound of a very organized stack of papers landing on a desk where the wrong document is already sitting on top. And the person on the other side of the desk is a Franklin County probate court judge who has seen every variation of this particular maneuver and has developed exactly the patience for it that 20 years in probate court produces. That sound happened on Thursday, October 9th, at approximately 10:15 a.m., when Carl Webb filed his response to Phil Bowman's emergency guardianship petition. I was at Carl's office on Indianola Avenue, a second-floor walk-up that smelled like paper files and window air conditioning and the reliable competence of a man who had never once in 11 years given me bad advice. Carl's assistant, A steady woman named Joan, who managed his calendar and his filings with the quiet authority of someone who understood that her organizational system was the reason everything worked, had coffee ready when I arrived at 8:45. Carl spread 3 documents across the conference table before he said a word. First, Dr. Hartley's affidavit time-stamped yesterday at 11:09 a.m. You are cognitively intact, no evidence of impairment, fully capable of managing your own affairs. This was filed with the court before Phil Bowman's petition was even docketed. He moved to the second document. Second, the Scott Family Revocable Trust. July 14th. Franklin County Recorder. Case number on file. This is the property title holder for 47 Brentwood Avenue. You are the grantor and current trustee. The trust is irrevocable from the perspective of creditors and legal challengers. Brenda cannot petition for conservatorship over an asset that is not in your individual estate. Third document. Bowman's petition. Filed yesterday afternoon. Alleges cognitive decline, inability to manage financial affairs, and requests emergency guardianship and conservatorship. Carl sat back. The conservatorship request lists 47 Brentwood as the primary asset. I looked at the petition. Brenda's attorney had done thorough work. The language was careful, the structure was correct. The medical language was precisely vague enough to sound clinical while saying nothing that could be immediately disproven. Phil Bowman was good at his job. He just hadn't checked the recorder's office before he filed. He didn't know about the trust. I said, he didn't know about the trust. Carl paused. I spoke to him this morning at 9. Professionally. I told him to pull the Franklin County property record for 47 Brentwood before he did anything else. He pulled it. He called me back 11 minutes later. What did he say? Carl's expression did the thing it does when he has information that is satisfying, but which he is too professional to deliver with the satisfaction it deserves. He asked me when the trust was filed. I told him July 14th. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he needed to consult with his client. He's going to advise Brenda to withdraw the petition. He's going to advise her to modify it significantly. The conservatorship over the property is gone. There's nothing there to conserve. The guardianship over your person is still viable in theory, but Dr. Hartley's affidavit makes it extremely difficult. Bowman is smart enough to know he's walking into a hearing with the primary asset argument already gone, and the competency argument already contradicted by an affidavit filed before his petition was even submitted. I picked up my coffee. She didn't check the recorder's office. She checked comparable sales. She didn't check who owned the property. I had been checking comparable sales and county records simultaneously since April, which is the difference between a person who wants to know what something is worth and a person who wants to know what something actually is. Brenda had always been focused on value. Patricia had been focused on meaning. I had spent 32 years trying to be both, and usually landing somewhere in the middle. Carl, what's the hearing date? Bowman filed for emergency status. The court scheduled it for October 22nd, 13 days out. And between now and then, I want 2 things. First, I want you to have a formal, in-office competency evaluation with Dr. Hartley. Not a phone consultation, in person, documented, timed on the record. We already have the August evaluation and yesterday's affidavit, but I want a fresh one with a date that postdates the petition. Second, I want Eddie to file a formal notice of his status as successor trustee with the court, so the record reflects that the trust has active beneficiaries and governance. When? Today, if possible. Dr. Hartley can see you at 3. Eddie can come to my office after work. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you for real. I want to tell you about Eddie, because Eddie is important in a way that isn't immediately obvious if you're only watching the legal proceedings. Eddie Scott, 38, civil engineer with the city of Columbus. Short North resident, husband of Beth, father of Lily, who is 7 and who had recently informed him that her current ambition was to be a marine biologist who also plays piano professionally, which Eddie had taken seriously because in his family we take things seriously. Eddie had known about the trust since August. He knew because I had sat down with him at his kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in August and explained exactly what I had done, why I had done it, and what I needed him to understand about his role as successor trustee. He had not been happy about the reason. Dad, you think Brenda's planning to... I think Brenda has been watching this house appreciate for 3 years and has mentioned its value at 4 separate family occasions in the last 18 months. I think she moved back to Columbus from Phoenix in March and offered to drive me to appointments starting in April. I think she retained an attorney in September. I had looked at him across the kitchen table. I hope I'm wrong. You're not wrong, Eddie had said quietly. I've been watching the same thing. I know. You've known this whole time. I've suspected. Suspecting and knowing are different. I didn't want to act on a suspicion. I wanted to build something stable first, and let the suspicion either prove itself or prove me wrong. Eddie had been quiet for a long moment. The trust protects the house no matter what. No matter what. Even if she files for guardianship, even if she gets a conservatorship over my personal assets, the house is in the trust. It's yours, held in trust for your family. She cannot reach it. Does she know? Nobody knows. That's the point. He had picked up his coffee mug and looked at it for a moment. Then, when were you going to tell me? I just did. He had laughed, the specific laugh of a son who recognizes his father's timing and accepts it even when it's frustrating. Yeah. Okay. What do I need to do? Possibly nothing at all. If I'm wrong, the trust is just good estate planning. If I'm right, you'll know what to do. I had not been wrong. Thursday afternoon. Dr. Hartley's office on Kenny Road. The evaluation lasted 90 minutes and covered cognitive function, memory, executive processing, and decision-making capacity. Dr. Susan Hartley was 62, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the specific, unhurried attention of a physician who understood that her job in this particular context was not just to assess, but to document with the precision of someone who knew the document was going to be read by a judge. At the end of the 90 minutes, she set down her pen and looked at me. Mr. Scott, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to write in the report. Please, full cognitive function, no evidence of decline from the August baseline. Executive function testing places you in the top quartile for your age cohort. Memory function is normal. Decision-making capacity is unimpaired. She paused. Frankly, your scores are better than most 60-year-olds I see. I do the crossword every morning. Keep doing the crossword. Eddie arrived at Carl's office at 5:30. Carl walked him through the successor trustee notice, 2 pages formally structured, filed with the probate court by Joan at 5:58 p.m. before the clerk's office closed. We drove home to Eddie's house for dinner. Beth had made pasta. Lily had made a drawing of what she explained was a deep-sea octopus, which she presented to me with the gravity of a scientist presenting a peer-reviewed paper. I told her it was the best octopus I'd seen all week. She accepted this assessment as accurate and moved on. Dad, Eddie said after dinner, while Beth was putting Lily to bed, what happens if the petition doesn't get withdrawn before the hearing? And Judge Carol Burns, who has been on the Franklin County probate bench for 16 years and has seen every variation of this, reads Dr. Hartley's evaluation, Carl's trust documentation, and Phil Bowman's petition, in that order, and makes a decision. You're not worried. I was worried in July, I said. In July I was worried enough to build something to stop worrying about. Now I've built it. He nodded slowly. When did you know? About Brenda. I thought about it. Really thought. The way you think when the answer is going to cost you something and you've decided to spend it honestly anyway. Easter dinner, I said. When she mentioned the Henderson sale. The way she mentioned it. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I knew something was. You waited 6 months. I built first. Then I waited. That was the week that Brenda's plan had its most important collision. Not with a judge, not with Carl Webb, but with the Franklin County Recorder's Office, which had been quietly holding a document since July 16th that made everything Brenda had planned for the previous 6 months completely irrelevant. The trust had been sitting there the whole time, patient, precise, exactly where I'd put it. I didn't know yet what Dale was going to do. Dale, Brenda's husband of 14 years, who had been quieter than Brenda through all of this, who had accompanied her to 2 attorney meetings but had, according to Carl's records, not signed anything himself. Dale, who would call Carl's office the following Monday with something that would change not just the shape of the hearing, but Carl's understanding of how long this had been in motion. Some plans collapse slowly, like a building with a foundation problem. You can watch the cracks appear for months before the structure finally decides to settle into what it was always becoming. Brenda's plan was not that kind. Brenda's plan collapsed the way a load-bearing wall goes when the support was never there. Suddenly, completely, in the specific silence that follows a sound you didn't expect. That silence happened on Monday, October 20th, at 9:14 a.m., when my phone rang and Carl Webb said, "Dale called me this morning." I was at my kitchen table on Brentwood Avenue, back home since the Wednesday I'd walked out of Riverside, back in the routine of coffee and the crossword, and the specific reassuring ordinariness of a house that was exactly where I had left it. The coffee was from the same bag I'd bought at Wyland's Market on North High the previous Saturday. The crossword was Tuesdays. I do them a day late on purpose, because there's a particular pleasure in already knowing the answers to things that were supposedly uncertain 24 hours ago. Dale. Brenda's husband. Yes. What did he say? Carl was quiet for the specific duration that means he is choosing how to deliver information that is both significant and complicated. He said he wants to withdraw from the proceeding. He said he attended 2 meetings with Phil Bowman, but did not sign any documents and did not participate in the decision to file the petition. He said he was aware Brenda had concerns about your living situation, but was not aware the plan included placing you at a facility without your knowledge. Do you believe him? I believe his attorney told him to call me. Whether that makes the content of the call true or simply strategic is an open question. A pause. He also gave me something. What? A text message thread between him and Brenda dating to June of this year. In June, Brenda explicitly discusses the house sale, the need to get Dad situated somewhere he'll be managed, and a timeline that targets late September or October. The messages are detailed. They predate the September attorney retention by 3 months. June. She'd been planning this since June. I had been right about Easter. Something had shifted at that dinner table, but the active planning had started 2 months later, while I was still thinking about it as a direction rather than a timeline. While she was testing the room, she was already building the blueprint. Dale sent you these. This morning. Voluntarily. I sat with that for a moment. Dale Pruitt, 44 years old, high school history teacher at Westerville North, a quiet, steady man who had always seemed slightly out of his depth in the particular atmosphere Brenda created when she was determined about something. I had never disliked Dale. I had sometimes felt sorry for him in the specific way you feel sorry for a person who is not equipped for the weather they live in. He's separating himself, I said. Completely. His attorney filed a notice this morning removing him from any association with the guardianship petition. And Phil Bowman. I spoke to him at 8 this morning. He's withdrawing the petition. He'll file the withdrawal notice today. The hearing is formally canceled. I looked at the crossword in front of me. The coffee was still warm. The kitchen on Brentwood Avenue was exactly what it had always been. The same light from the east window, the same creak in the third floorboard from the refrigerator, the same view of the backyard garden where Patricia had planted the rose bushes in 2004, and which I had maintained every season since because I had promised her I would. It's over, I said. The guardianship proceeding is over. The APS referral is still active. Adult Protective Services opened a case when Carl filed the initial response, and that proceeds independently. What does that mean practically? It means someone from APS will contact you for a formal interview. It means the case file, including Dale's text messages, is now part of a state record. It means Brenda is going to have a record of this regardless of what happens in any court. It does not mean criminal charges are automatic. This is civil territory. But the documentation is there if it ever becomes relevant. I understood. Civil consequences first, everything else at the speed it moves. Carl, what do I owe you? He named a number. It was fair for what he'd done. I told him I'd bring a check to Joan by Friday. Justin, he said, before we hung up. For what it's worth, the trust was the right call. July 14th. That's when this was over. Everything since then was just procedure. Patricia used to say, the best time to fix a problem is before it starts. She was right. She was right about most things. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely. I want to tell you about the conversation with Brenda. Because there was one, eventually, and I think you deserve to know how it went. She called on a Thursday evening, October 23rd, 3 days after the petition was withdrawn. She called from her own phone, which told me she'd decided to make the call rather than having Phil Bowman make it for her, which I took as a point in her favor even under the circumstances. I answered, "Dad, Brenda." A long pause. The pause of a woman who has prepared something and is now finding that everything she prepared sounds insufficient. "I want to explain." "You don't have to explain," I said. "I understand what happened. Dad, I was worried. The house is too big for you to manage alone. And after Mom, Brenda." Quiet, even. The voice I'd used for 26 years when a student was about to say something they'd regret, and I wanted to give them a moment to reconsider. "I'm not angry, I'm disappointed, and those are different things, and I think you know which one is harder to recover from." Silence. "The trust," she said finally. "You knew. You planned for it." "I planned for contingencies. That's what responsible people do. You planned for me." I didn't answer that directly. Because the direct answer was yes, and because yes was accurate, and because accurate was not the same as what I wanted to say to my daughter on a Thursday evening in the kitchen on Brentwood Avenue. "The house is in trust for Eddie's family," I said. "It was always going to go to Eddie. Not because of this, because Eddie has a daughter who might want to grow up in Clintonville the way you grew up in Clintonville, and because this is a house that should be passed down, not liquidated. That decision was made before any of this happened. You didn't tell me. Would it have changed what you did?" The pause that followed was long enough to be an answer. "I don't know," she said finally, and it was the first thing she'd said in the conversation that I believed was completely true. "I know," I said. "That's the part I'm going to be thinking about for a while." We talked for another 12 minutes, not about the trust or the petition or Dale's text messages or Phil Bowman or Riverside Senior Living. We talked about Patricia, about the rose bushes in the backyard, about Brenda's daughter Mia, who was 9 and who had recently decided she wanted to be a veterinarian, which I found interesting given that Lily wanted to be a marine biologist and the next generation apparently had strong feelings about animals. It was not a healed conversation. It was the beginning of a long, slow process of determining what healed would even look like, which was the most honest outcome available. Some things you build in advance. Some things you have to construct as you go with whatever materials are available, in whatever time you have. I've always been better at the first kind. I'm working on the second. Saturday, November 1st. Brentwood Avenue, morning. The crossword was Wednesdays. I'd gotten behind during the week and was catching up. Eddie called at 9:30. "Lily wants to know if she can come see the rose bushes. The rose bushes are done for the season. She knows. She wants to see them anyway. Beth thinks she's going through a gardening phase. Bring her over." They arrived at 10:15. Lily went directly to the backyard and stood in front of the rose bushes with the focused attention of a 7-year-old scientist cataloging a specimen. Eddie stood on the back porch and watched her. I stood beside him with my coffee. "She's going to want to plant something," Eddie said. "Good. The side bed needs attention. Dad." He looked at me, the specific look of a son who has been carrying something and is deciding whether to put it down. "Are you all right?" "Actually all right. I thought about it the way I think about crossword answers. Honestly, without guessing. Brenda is my daughter," I said. Nothing she did stopped being painful, just because I saw it coming. I saw it coming, and I built something to stop it, and I'm glad I did. But seeing it coming didn't make it not hurt. Eddie nodded. He didn't say anything because he understood that nothing needed to be added. Lily came back to the porch and announced that the rose bushes were dormant, and that she had read that dormant plants were not dead, they were conserving energy for spring. "That's exactly right," I said. She looked at me with the careful consideration of a child evaluating whether an adult has actually understood her. Apparently satisfied, she went back to the garden. "She's going to be something," Eddie said. "She already is." I finished my coffee. The trust document was in Carl's file. The house at 47 Brentwood was in the trust. The rose bushes were dormant. The crossword was Wednesdays and I was going to finish it before noon. Some things you build in July so that when October comes, the structure is already standing. My father built things that way, measure twice, cut once, and never start a job without knowing where it ends. I had spent 26 years teaching young people that the most powerful position you can occupy is one you took before anyone realized it was available. The trust was filed July 14th. Brenda had been planning since June. I had been planning since April. Patricia used to say I was always 3 steps ahead. She meant it as a compliment, mostly, and occasionally as a complaint, and I had loved her for both. The rose bushes would come back in March. They always did. The house would be here when they did.